New Buccaneers linebacker Anthony Walker has a message for his critics. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Another mailbag question, well, a couple more mailbag questions coming up in a little bit. We're going to get through those, but let's start today's show with new Buccaneers linebacker Anthony Walker and some of the criticism that has been thrown his way. Now, I am certainly guilty of this. I was critical of Walker when the signing was announced. And I said that he was essentially an even swap for KJ Britt, that he was about the same in coverage, and that this wasn't really an upgrade at the position. They were essentially kind of swapping out players with the Miami Dolphins because that's where KJ Britt went. I felt that Walker was more of a depth or a rotational signing for the team, and that they were still going to look for their new starting linebacker in the upcoming draft. Now, I have not completely come off of this stance, but Walker has taken issue with some of the criticisms of his ability to cover, criticisms that I've made, that other people in the media have made, people on social media. When Walker met with the Buccaneers media, he said, quote, "I see all the stuff on social media and everything where people will be like, oh, his PFF grade and all that. I'm here to tell you, you can watch the film. The ball does not get completed in front of me or in the middle of the field. That's how I feel." He went on to say, quote, "Defense is all about just knowing where your spot is and everyone knowing where their spot is, understanding how offenses can attack and make sure we limit those gains when they do throw it there. Obviously, it starts with me doing my job. My job is to cover the middle of the field," end quote. Now, you guys know that I don't look at PFF grades as the end-all, be-all of football analysis, but I do reference it a lot on this show as a frame of reference. When Walker was signed, I mentioned that his coverage grade rank was just 2 spot different than KJ Britt's from last season, that essentially the Bucs were not upgrading in that aspect of the position. Perhaps that was a little hasty and unfair to Walker. At least that's what he believes. Walker's coverage grade last season was a 39.1. That's pretty bad, to put it nicely. However, that was the lowest of his career, and it doesn't seem fully indicative of his ability. In fact, it's not like he was having a steady decline in his coverage grades that you could have seen a year like last season coming. He was actually coming off of a 3-year stretch where he had his best coverage seasons. A 76.8 in 2023, a 90.0 in 2022, and a 78.2 in 2021. Back in 2019 with the Colts, he had a grade of 73.3. Outside of that, in 2017, 2018, and 2020, his grades were all in the mid-50s. So let's go a little bit deeper. His best season was 2022 when he had a grade of 90, but he had just 72 coverage snaps that season. In 2021, his second best year at a 78.2, he had 399 coverage snaps. 2023, his 76.8 grade, 245 coverage snaps. The 72 snaps in 2022 were his lowest since his rookie year by far. Last year, he had 293 coverage snaps, allowing 27 receptions on 32 targets for 293 yards with 1 touchdown and 209 yards after catch allowed. Now, he did have an interception, which was just the 4th in his career and his first since 2020, but 0 pass breakups for the first time since his rookie season. Prior to the last 2 seasons, Walker had never allowed double-digit yards per reception in a season. However, the last 2 seasons, he allowed 12.3 and 10.9 yards per reception. Ultimately, what it boils down to is this. Over the course of his career, Walker has allowed a lot of receptions. So saying that he doesn't allow the ball to be caught in front of him isn't exactly true. We are talking 80.3% of passes in his direction over the course of his career have been completed. 220 receptions on 274 targets. However, he's not the one that will generally give up the big play. The passes are caught and the player is almost immediately brought down. That could be frustrating at times as you're watching these games, especially if the reception happens on a 3rd down that gives up a 1st down when the defense needs to get a stop and get off the field. But we're not talking about Devin White wheel route gashes. We're not talking about that level of ineptitude in coverage. Overall, I think last year might just be a forgotten year for Anthony Walker. I'm not sure if it was the scheme, if it was his fit within the scheme, if it was his comfort level, but things across the board for him in Miami were not great, like abnormally off. It was his overall worst season since his rookie year. We know he's excited to be in Tampa, especially to play with Lavonte David, who he's known most of his life. And he said was a big reason that he came to Tampa in the first place. So I think there's opportunity here for him to get back to the type of player he was during that really solid 3-year stretch in Cleveland. Do I still think that the Bucs look to upgrade again in the draft and try to land their starter for 2025? Absolutely. But taking a look at things now, this may be a little bit bigger of an upgrade over Britt than I originally believed. I haven't had time to sit down and go through, all of his games in Cleveland when he had such great coverage grades. But, there's the truth lies somewhere in the middle, right? That's how it generally is. Walker is saying that he doesn't allow receptions to happen in front of him. That's obviously not true. At the same time, the grades from PFF may be a little bit more harsh than you want to give them credit for. So the truth is somewhere in the middle there. I can say this. The coverage can't get worse than what KJ Britt did last year in Tampa. And I like KJ. I wish him the best of luck in Miami. But he was the worst cover linebacker in the NFL last season. Again, that's according to PFF. If we're going to do an apples-to-apples comparison, and we're going to talk about Walker's PFF grades, we also have to talk about KJ Britt's. Keep things on a level playing field. So the coverage can't get any worse. Now, the hope is that it returns back to his Cleveland form in 2021, 2022, 2023, because that's when he was at his best. That's when he really thrived in pass coverage. But to take a look at his situation and his skill set and say that he is for sure the locked and loaded starter for the Buccaneers in 2025 isn't fair, because there's still upgrades that can be made. Whether that's with Jahad Campbell, whether that's with Jeffrey Bassa on day 2, whether that's with some of these other off-ball linebackers that are coming up in the draft, you can find an upgrade and potentially find the future at inside linebacker after Lavonte moves on. And who knows? Maybe it'll be whoever they draft plus Anthony Walker. He's only on a 1-year deal, but if he balls out, I talked about it earlier this week, the Bucs reward their own. So if he balls out, and then you got this locked and loaded starter that you drafted in, the upcoming draft, well, now you have your starting pair for next season, and you're good to go. Plus, you still have Servassier Dennis there in the mix. More mailbag questions coming up. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and it's simple. And within a day, you will have multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, and in my case, youth sports, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, all of your spending, all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Reggie sent in a really good question about the free agent market and said, with the Texans resetting the corner market price, what type of ripple effect on the future marketplace for top corners do you see? The reason for my question is we don't have a lockdown corner outside of McCollum, and he's on a rookie contract. I know he will command some coin to re-sign him in as early as, say, next offseason. They are becoming expensive again. I wonder your thoughts. So Zyon is entering a contract year. If the Bucs want to lock him up for lower money, they need to do that now rather than wait until the offseason. However, for those of you that don't know, Reggie is referring to the deal that the Texans did with cornerback Derek Stingley Jr. He just got 3 years, $90 million. That makes him the highest paid defensive back in NFL history on a per year basis. Excuse me. Now, it was just last year that Antoine Winfield Jr. became the highest paid defensive back in NFL history. So the short answer is it's not really going to affect the Bucs all that much. Truly, it's just the cycle of the NFL. Every year, we end up with someone else becoming the highest paid this or that in NFL history, and it's going to continue to happen every season for the rest of the NFL's existence. As long as the revenue keeps rising and the salary cap keeps rising, players are going to keep getting bigger and bigger deals. So Jamar Chase's deal, Josh Allen's deal, Derek Stingley Jr.'s deal, it's all irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. The Bucs made two different players the highest paid at their position last year, and those deals were already overtaken just 1 year later. The more important issue is how is that going to affect Zyon McCollum and the Bucs cornerback situation? So this goes back to my episode yesterday where I talked about prioritizing cornerback over linebacker early in the draft to get one of those lockdown guys. If you can get one of those guys in the first round that's up there with players like Sauce Gardner and Devin Witherspoon, now you have a top-tier corner for the next 5 years on a rookie deal, and that is huge. that means that you're not going to be paying the rate of $25+ million for that elite corner. So you're going to pay for it later. There's no getting around that unless you just let that player walk. But if you have one of those elite shutdown corners, you're not going to want him to walk. You're going to pay him what his market value is, or you're going to get that extension in after you trigger the 5th-year option and get him in, at that deal. Don't let him hit the market, because then the price is going to get astronomical. You lock him up in that 5th-year deal, just like the Bengals did with Jamar Chase. So you can deal with that down the line. You draft that guy, whether it's Benjamin Morrison or Jahdae Barron or whoever, Will Johnson, you have a favorable deal for 5 years. As for Zion, his rookie deal was 4 years and less than $325,000 in guaranteed money. His overall contract was less than $4 million total. So he is going to get a significant hike, but he's not going to make that upper tier money unless he has just an unbelievable leap this season and winds up with those 6 interceptions that he was talking about last year. Plus, he has one of the best seasons in the league for a corner, from everything from completion percentage to yards allowed to touchdowns to pass breakups. I think you're probably looking in the range of about $12 to $14 million a year for Zyon McCollum. That's around what Jamel Dean is getting now. It's in the same range as guys like Brandon Stevens, Taron Johnson, Nate Hobbs, DJ Reed. I think he probably ends up in that range. Now, Witherspoon and Sauce are going to break the bank when they're due for new deals. But I think Zion, personally, is better than Carlton Davis, and he just got $18 million a year. Now, granted, you have to take into account the fact that the Patriots were throwing crazy money around to get guys to come there because they're not a good team right now. But Kenny Moore, Jordan Lewis, Jamel Dean, like the guys in that pay range where I think Zion is going to land, I'm going to take Zion over those guys all day long and twice on Sundays. So don't really worry about what the Texans just did. It's not going to affect the Bucs' ability to sign McCollum. It's not going to impact his price that much. It's the Witherspoons, the Sauce Gardners, Byron Murphy, when he gets another slice of the pie in 2027. Those are the guys that are going to be licking their chops at the Derek Stingley Jr. deal, because those are the upper echelon, top tier elite corners in the NFL. Zion's not there. He's good. He's not elite. Hopefully he becomes elite. That'd be fantastic. That would be a lot of fun. But he's not in that range yet. He's not going to be getting that $18, $20, $22 million a year when he's able to hit free agency. Now, again, go ahead and lock him up now. Sign him to a 3-year extension. Give him a little bit of a boost there. And then on the back end, you're probably, if he continues his trajectory and his development, you're going to be coming out with a team-friendly deal in, probably years 2 and 3 of that contract. So hopefully whoever the Bucs draft this year ends up in that top tier of cornerback as well. And then we can talk about what a great problem it is that the Bucs have heading into his contract year in 2030 or 2031, if I'm even still doing this show at that point. I hope I am, but who knows? That's a long, long time from now. All right. One proposed NFL rule change. It has one of the insiders thinking outside the box, and quite frankly, I absolutely love it. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, and insider Ricky dropped another one on me, and he says, I just heard the latest episode of The Squad, and it got me thinking. If they went forward with the reseeding rule change for the playoffs, would they need to look into the first place schedule for teams that win the division. For example, the Packers finished third in the division. They get a third place schedule, but based on the new reseeding rule, could potentially host a division winner in the playoffs. So this is a great question. It really, truly is. And again, for those that don't know, there are some rule changes being proposed that will be voted on at the owners' meetings. And one of them was proposed by the Lions, which would amend the current playoff seeding format to allow wildcard teams to be seeded higher than division champions if the wildcard team has a better record in the regular season. The reasoning for that change, according to the Lions, is, quote, competitive equity, provides excitement and competition in late season games, rewards the best performing teams from the regular season, end quote. Okay, first off, I hate this rule with the fiery passion of 1,000 suns. I hate this rule change proposal. I think it's stupid. And once again, when I miss a squad episode, they happen to talk about it. But no, this is terrible, and I hate it. There's only one way to guarantee your way into the playoffs, and that is you have to win your division. You do that, you get in the playoffs. That should be rewarded with you playing at home. I mean, come on. If you're going to hand out shirts and hats for winning the division, that's what Bruce Arians always called a shirt and hat game. If you're going to hand that stuff out and then sell it on website, on your team store to the fans, then those teams that win that division should get a home game. And this has been an argument for decades because thanks to the parity of the NFL, there's always one or two divisions that are just so much weaker than the rest of the league. For a long time, it was the NFC West and the AFC East outside of the Patriots. I mean, go back to when the Seattle Seahawks won their division with a losing record, hosted the New Orleans Saints, who I think were like a 13-win team that year, and then beat them with the Beastquake. Like, you don't get that moment in New Orleans. That happens because New Orleans had to go to Seattle, and that home field advantage was a true advantage. For the last couple of years, it's been the NFC South and the AFC South that have been the weakest divisions. Now, last year, you can absolutely make the argument that the NFC West was weaker than the NFC South. But it happens all the time, like literally every year. So we're going to uproot the playoff structure because some teams have easier schedules than others. That's stupid. I could see this being an argument in other major sports because they all play every team in the league at least once. The NFL doesn't. Even then, I don't think teams should bump division winners to lower seeds, or I don't think leagues should bump division winners to lower seeds because a wild card team has a better overall record. The entire thing is asinine and stupid. That said, here's my answer to Ricky. Yes. An emphatic, unrelenting yes. Look, if you're going to pass this stupid proposal, which we don't know if they will or not, this is a hypothetical situation. But if you're going to punish division winners for not having records as good as wildcard teams, then you have to throw the current scheduling format out the window. You know, the argument that we heard was, how is it fair for the Vikings to play a road game in the playoffs when they had a better record than every other team in the conference? You know, the Lions and Vikings in the final week of the season were playing for the 1 seed and the 5 seed. How is that fair? Okay. By that logic, let's say they change the seeding rule. The Bucs win the NFC South at 11-6. But now in the opening round of the playoffs, they have to go on the road to Green Bay, even though the Packers finished second in the NFC North, but they were 12-5. How would it be fair the following season for the Bucs to have to face a tougher schedule since they apparently weren't as good as the Packers? You can't have it both ways. The Bucs are entering 2025 playing a first place schedule. They have to face every division winner from last year. The Packers get a third place schedule. That's a much easier path to the postseason. So if you're going to give wildcard teams home playoff games based off of their record, then you can't turn around and give them 3 games the following season that are easier than the team that they hosted has to face. Ultimately, I don't think it'll pass. Owners aren't going to care who has the better overall record. They want their home playoff games if they win the division. And most of them have been around long enough to know that the league has its ebbs and flows. And while it was an issue last year, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be an issue this year or the year after. They also don't want to screw themselves in the event that they're the ones winning the weak division and getting to host a playoff game and get all that extra revenue, even though their team finished 9-7 and the wild card team coming to town went 10-7, or they finished 9-8 and the wild card team that they're hosting went 10-7. So yeah, that's my stance. The teams cannot have their cake and eat it too. You either win the division and you get a home playoff game, but have to take on that first place schedule, or you reseed and then you have to figure out how to adjust the scheduling accordingly. Because if you get to host a playoff game because you're better, then you better face the tougher schedule than the team that you're hosting, regardless of if they won a division or not. Hopefully the owners are smart and don't pass this absolute just drivel nonsense. But it keeps coming up. At some point, they're probably going to pass it. At which point, I will be on this show losing my ever-loving mind and talking about how it's simply just unfair to give a team a home playoff game and then force the team that they host to play a tougher schedule the next year. You have to figure out the scheduling a different way. Like, plain and simple, you have to. It didn't used to be this way where the division winners all faced each other the following year. You're going to have to go back to the old way of doing it. Because if you're going to reward a wild card team and punish a division winner, then you can't give the wild card team the easier schedule. That's going to do it for this episode. We're going to be back on Monday. It's going to be a mock draft Monday. Until then, please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at Yarcho_Bucs. Make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.